But yeah, I'm Empathetic. Happy New Year. 2020. Let's do this.
Well, that aged well. What up, everyone? I am Havoc, and finally, I'm back with another review. Now, I was going to do a whole New Year's update, but after the utter shit fest that was last year, I'm not getting my hopes up. You'll forgive me for that. So the best we can do is take each day as they come, and play with the cards you're dealt, as I always say. Now, without further ado, let's dive into one of two reviews I'll be doing. Towards the end of last year, there were two games that came out very close to each other. Those were Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity and the long-awaited Cyberpunk 2077. And I know what you're thinking, Hyrule Warriors has to be the first since it came out first, and I'm a huge Zelda fan, right?
Wrong!
Yes, I'm a huge Zelda fan, and yes, Hyrule Warriors came out first. But I would like to address the elephant in the room first, as it has caused a massive wave of news and controversy. So I figured I'd do Cyberpunk, and get my two eddies, so to speak. Eddies being slang for Euro dollars, which are the currency in-game. Now wake the fuck up, Samurai. We got a game to review. To begin, I was pretty interested in this game well before its release. There was that cinematic teaser that came out in 2012, but it wasn't that big a thing for me, as I had little to no idea what CD Projekt Red was at the time. Then 3 years later, one of the biggest RPGs comes out in the form of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, which made waves for the genre and the gaming community as a whole. Immersive story with plenty of choices that really matter. A diverse cast of characters who you would come to love and or hate, or who would come to love and or hate you. Some of which leading to some pretty spicy romance options. Team Yennefer represent. Deep developed combat system with a pretty decent difficulty spike and learning curve. A game rightfully deserving of all its accolades. And I never beat it. What? I know. Shameful. The Witcher was that kind of game that I needed to really plant myself in my seat and dedicate hours and hours of my time to actually make any real progress. And the absolute loads of content didn't help either. I love huge and immersive games, but that was almost too overwhelming, so I only dabble in it every now and then. Cyberpunk 2077, on the other hand, there's a certain criteria I like in my games. Accessible at face value with loads of content in the background that you can expand your experience on over time. Character creation and customization, not only cosmetic, but also skill trees and the like that allow you to build a character you want. Riveting real-time combat, and since I do enjoy the odd shooter, this was right up my alley. Expansive open world with plenty of lore and backstory. Characters that feel like they really live in the world with you, and that you can interact with at a similar level. Check all boxes, Cyberpunk 2077 delivers. Even if it isn't quite as expansive as a game like Skyrim, Mass Effect, or even its Witcher predecessor, the game is still extremely enjoyable and has plenty of content to keep you coming back. I legitimately fell into this game. With an easy enough combat system to grasp, and with plenty of options to choose from, I really felt like I could mold my character into whatever I wanted. I started as a female street kid V, and tried to make her look and act as close to my own Cyberpunk era character in my own ongoing project, the Elysia Chronicles. And though at first I had a little to no idea on what the grand scheme of the story was, I was very quick to learn and came to love it. As soon as you meet your backseat driver, Johnny Silverhand, played by Keanu Reeves, the game takes off. You're thrown into a world of crime, mystery, psychology, action, and your choices, for some part at least, do matter in the long run. There are plenty of characters to meet and even romance during your time in Night City. And luckily, I picked a female V, so I had the best romance of all in Judy. Fight me. And the game still has me in a vice as I completed almost all of the activities with my female V and have since started over as a nomad male V for my second playthrough. But that doesn't mean it's without its flaws. Bouncing off what I was saying about the story, while you model and create your V, you're still not necessarily playing as your own V. lots of the speech options are limited and don't reflect exactly what you intended. It very much felt like V was still his or her own character as opposed to the Night City representation of you. I know, coherency in the story, but even Shepard from Mass Effect or even Geralt from The Witcher, who was already a pre-established character, had more of a blank slate that you could literally make plenty of choices that reflected you, even if it was still a bit limited. Though I will say lots of RPGs with a speech choice system suffer from this. But I will say that it is justified because otherwise we wouldn't have these stories. But that isn't the biggest problem Cyberpunk 2077 has. Case in point, bugs. Lots and lots of bugs and glitches.
Oye, despacio!
Got you, assholes! V, aim for the driver!
The game's biggest fault was easily the sheer amount of unpolished and lack of optimization, and this was apparently supposed to run fine on the base versions of the previous generation. PS4 and Xbox One are last gen now, Jesus Christ. Now, I played on the PS4 Pro, so my experience wasn't nearly as bad as others whom I know and have seen. But even I met a lot of missing textures, pop-ins, collision errors, frame drops, glitched quests, and the dreaded game crashes. However, this was very much how Skyrim was, especially on the PS3 at launch. Are there a lot of bugs? Oh yeah. Do I think the game should have been delayed for the umpteenth time? Yeah. Did it ruin my experience? Sometimes. Did it make me completely regret my decision to play it? Nope. Do I hate the game or the developers for the game's state? Oh hell no. Right from the get-go, CDPR was churning out patches and hotfixes to address the multitude of problems, and compared to how it was at launch, it has very much improved. There's still the odd crash or texture glitch, but it's handling itself much better. PlayStation even removed it entirely from its digital store because of its current state, so I'm lucky I got a physical copy. Now I'm only speaking from my own experience, so if people are still having plenty of these problems, I'm sorry. But I will say this. Past the glitches, the game is very fun and very enjoyable. Hell, sometimes the bugs are just fun to witness. For example, I honestly laughed every time I saw one of the NPCs revert to a PS1-like model that reminded me a lot of the original Metal Gear's graphics. And don't even get me started with the flying vehicles and invisible ramps and bumps. Now, though I am mostly on the positive end of the game, there are some other minor problems I have with it aside from the game's lack of polish. And funny enough, these are also reasons I distance myself from Witcher so much. God, I need to finish that game. Cyberpunk 2077 uses a lot of the same features and mechanics of The Witcher in the form of its clothing and weapons system, which are very looter-like. And for those of you who don't know, I am not a big looter fan. Games like Destiny, Borderlands, Warframe are games I typically avoid. There's just something so empty about picking up a piece of equipment that you like, using it for so long, upgrading it a bit if possible, only to be met by either A, a section of the game that renders it useless and obsolete, or B, finding another similar or completely different piece of equipment with stats that render it useless and obsolete, thus having to throw it away and or replace it. And as the Hardy Boys said,
Obsolete! Delete! Obsolete! Delete! Obsolete! Delete!
now I know that's what the crafting mechanic is for, and it's much more accessible, albeit broken, than Cyberpunk. But it just breaks immersion, if you ask me. I like to have a weapon or outfit that I've grown to identify with that I can upgrade right from the get-go until I get to the point where I find something that I actually like more. Skyrim did this perfectly, where I'd start with the basic armor and weapons until I could craft or find my favorites, like the Ebony Mail, or the Daedric or Dragon Skill armors, and the blades and Nord hero swords. In Cyberpunk, outside the few pieces of iconic clothing and the iconic weapons, you're constantly swapping out your weapons and equipment, and using the crafting mechanic to upgrade them becomes a chore. It's tolerable, but I wish there was a setting for clothing and weapons that revolved around personal preference rather than stats, like in Ghost Recon Breakpoint or, better yet, Wildlands. Maybe I'm just being overly picky here, but I know I'm not the only one who felt that way. Especially when you consider that a large portion of the game was cut before release, which included a whole style mechanic that focused more on your aesthetic than actual performance. That being said, that was another huge missed opportunity, was the sheer amount of stuff missing from what was teased. Third-person cutscenes and gameplay that give an actual point to creating and customizing your character, as well as feeling a little more cinematic. A lot of character customization options missing, including more body type options, tattoos where you can choose what image and where to put it, a much more diverse color palette, and the ability to choose more personality traits that your V could identify with, as opposed to the 3 life paths. More immersive combat with some weapons having more functions, more traversal options, more speech options, the very large list goes on. There's an entire Reddit post dedicated to the amount of stuff missing, and it's baffling. I understand they needed to cut some content to make up for the numerous delays, but that sheer amount on top of the all-around bugginess of the game, I would have just said wait a bit longer. As a certain game creator and legend Shigeru Miyamoto once said, a delayed game is eventually good. A rush game is forever bad. I know, there's exceptions. I can only hope some of it gets added as DLC in the future, even if it's slowly drip-fed. But what we got, despite the long list of nitpicks and shortcomings, does not make this a bad game. Even with the limited speech, the cut content, the delays, and the bugs, the game is still very fun and immersive. In my female V playthrough, I have clocked about 100 hours, give or take, by the time of writing this review. I know, probably rookie numbers compared to a lot of other people, but with my schedule, it has really been the go-to game for me as of late. So I am giving Cyberpunk 2077, as of right now, a gallant rating of 3 out of 5. It does still have a lot to work on and polish, and I can only hope that more patches and fixes, as well as the DLCs, add more to the game to make it feel more complete, and then some. But even as is, I'm satisfied, and I feel Cyberpunk was, to some degree, worth the wait. In the meantime, folks, I am Gallant Havoc. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll be in the corner crying about how much of a crush I have on Judy.